Charlotte Grimmel. Welcome to the Untrivial Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thanks for having me, Allie.
Oh my goodness, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited to be speaking with you today all about mindset. So, you run the account on Instagram called The Mind Friend, and we are just going to be getting into all the psychology behind our brain and diving really deep into some of our common brain traps, but also some ways that we can kind of improve and be better friends with our mind. I love that title because you're right. We want to be friends with our mind, but sometimes our mind is almost also our worst enemy.
Absolutely. And that's why it exists, right? It's kind of like it all circles around this idea that we have a choice in that matter. We don't just have to accept our mind being, a little bully, but we can sort of reshape the relationship that we have with it and become friends with it. And then that usually has a ripple effect that just positively influences almost everything in our lives.
I love that. So, for those in the audience who may not know you, what is your background and what would you say you do today?
Ooh, I always am like the opposite, the anti-elevator pitch, but I'll try my very best to be like very concise. So I have a background in psychology. So I have a master's in psychology. I used to work in sort of psychological consulting and HR, very much like a bit of a corporate background going there, which is important to say because when you say psychology, people often assume clinical psychology, where it's so much broader. I was always more focused on like performance psychology, motivational psychology, positive psychology. And so then now what I do to just fast forward from there is I help primarily entrepreneurs. I always say that because otherwise people go like, oh, but I also want to work with you or I love your stuff or whatever. But primarily entrepreneurs just kind of, I guess, align their mind with their ambition is probably the best way I would put it. And that means that they run a business that feels as good as it looks and that is actually joyful to run because of the alignment, because it's really one of two things that happens often is I run a business and I'm really dedicated and consistent and I follow all these like strategies and blueprints and all the things, and all of a sudden I have a really great business but I'm actually miserable running it.
Mm.
Or I kind of get lost in the opposite where I have all these great ideas and I have all these, visions and dreams and all the things, but I'm maybe not really executing, maybe because I think I have to fit myself into a box, or maybe because I just struggle to get past the self-sabotage of it, etc. And so then in any case, I'm not ending up having a business that A, works and B, works for me, right? And that's kind of at the intersection where I work. So I always like to say it's honestly like where psychology and entrepreneurship meet. That's where I work.
That's so cool. And that's such an interesting point that, you can be in it would be the dream to have it all and like be in that space where you're loving what you're doing and you're coping with it really well. And everyone talks about how hard entrepreneurship is. And it almost feels like it's this elusive sweet spot. Like, do you find a lot of folks that you work with are really trying to get there and feel like other people are there? Or like, how common do you think it is for people to be kind of in one of those two areas of struggle with it?
Honestly, I think that I've not ever met a single entrepreneur who hasn't been in one of them. And
Mm.
I think that has a lot to do with, honestly, societal conditioning, for lack of a better term, because we are so used to having structure that sort of gives us feedback on whether we are doing something right or not. So meaning, if I go into the corporate world and I climb the ladder, so to speak, I constantly get feedback, right? And I have somebody else telling me whether I'm doing the right things and whether I'm doing them well and all those things. And all of that completely falls away when I become my own
Mm-hmm.
boss and I go into entrepreneurship. So I lose the entire system. And people respond to that in different ways. Some people respond to that by going like, okay, well, I'll find myself a system, which is where I go the route of I'll take someone else's blueprint. And if it worked for them, then I'll just execute it exactly the same way. And I disregard like maybe my own energy, value, integrity, anything like that, where it will work. Probably
Mm-hmm.
like some elements of that will work, but I will feel icky about it, or I will feel actually depleted by it and exhausted by it because it's not at all built around who I am. And then the other part is I'm putting the systems and all the structure like to the side because I want to just do my own thing. But the risk with that is I kind of stay in like airy fairy land where I'm like, yeah, but I want it to be in flow and I'll only execute when it feels right. And all those
Right.
things where yeah, you kind of lean a little too heavy the other side. And I think that I've honestly, yeah, I think I've probably met more people in the for former category. But I think that that's also because a lot of people are stuck in the latter. And so then they don't think of
Mm,
themselves yet as an entrepreneur. You know, they've kind of been thinking about the dream for years, or they've been thinking about doing the thing for years, or they're kind of doing it, but not consistently, and all those things. So they don't tend to think of themselves that way. But really, they have that same spirit in them.
right. It's interesting, yeah, the different sides of I guess we could maybe call this a little bit of self-sabotage because they're both situations where you want something and the decision you've made is kind of getting in your own way with that end result. So I guess getting into self-sabotage, how would you describe it? What's the background of self-sabotage and why it happens?
I mean, I really wish there was like a like a one answer to that, but self-sabotage is so layered, right? There's so many different
Yeah.
expressions of it, right? It could be that I don't do the thing that I know I want to do. It could be that use perfectionism. It could be that I am the complete overthinker who gets stuck in the absolute detail. But I think that it's really anything where when we use that, what we said at the start, where I am being my worst enemy, as in where something might be accessible to me, but I'm not following through on it in that sense.
Mm.
And I think that's how I see it. There's many, many different versions of this and definitions of it, but that's how I see it. And I think honestly that it's also not as straightforward as saying sort of, you know, it's me knowing I want it but not doing it, and thus clearly I'm self-sabotaging it, or because I'm not doing these actions, then I'm not. It's so, you know, it's perpetuated by a lot of beliefs and thoughts and sort of habitual patterns that we have that we've embodied. And even if that's just the pattern of I think everything needs to be perfect before I ever show it to the world. Like that's a pattern I can get used to in the corporate world or growing up or whatever it is. And that will be accompanied by certain beliefs and certain thoughts and then certain emotions around putting something out there. So it's really like a very, like, I always explain it as a cycle and where all these things play together. But what
Hmm.
ends up happening, right, is a behavior that I don't want, and I know it's not contributing towards what I actually want to achieve. And I start feeling this like disconnect and this stuckness and this like, I know I'm in my own way. I'm being my worst enemy, but
Hmm.
like I can't hard knuckle my way out of that, like, which is what most people try to do. Like most people go like, I just need to be more disciplined and I need to be more this. And they like slap another hack onto it or whatever it is. That's where in my experience and my work, that doesn't work.
Mm, yeah, that makes total sense. I was thinking about it kind of prior to this conversation, almost wondering like, is it just a bad coping style or the wrong coping style for the situation in terms of, leaning harder into perfectionism or leaning into avoidance? Like, would you describe self-sabotaging as a form of coping with, a difficult situation or trying to get what you want, or do you not use that labeling?
So I don't use the word coping, but I think maybe even bigger than that, I use the word protection mechanism. So I often say, you
Mm,
know, it's like self-sabotage in its base is a fear avoidance strategy because there's something there that I'm trying to protect myself from, right? And that could be I use perfectionism because I fear that if I put my work out any less than perfect, then people will criticize me and then I will fail and I will feel attacked and I might have that linked to my worthiness, something like that.
mm,
So it makes a lot of sense for me to be, well, no, let me perfect, perfect, perfect. And then either I never put the work out there because I'm perfecting it still and I have a logical sounding reason for why it's not out there, or B, it really like I've worked myself to the bone and it is so flawless that I actually will succeed in that way. But again, I'm losing my own sense of contentment and energy and sort of fulfillment within that, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, so I always like to think of it, and I think this is quite freeing for people to think about it as a protection mechanism, a safety strategy that your brain has somehow built. And again, that is perpetuated by a lot of beliefs, thoughts, emotions that you have, that sort of uphold that, you know, structure of the safety mechanism. And it's really freeing to realize that, you know, it's not like you're broken or you're lazy or you're just undisciplined or you're failing. It's really just like your brain is quite intelligent. Like it knows how to, you know, orchestrate things in a way that will keep you safe in what is familiar and comfortable. And that's kind of the angle I bring to it, which immediately usually just sparks a lot of compassion for like
Yeah.
self-compassion, but also just sparks a little bit of that curiosity that is so important in saying like, oh, okay, well, if it, what might it be protecting me from, right? And how am I upholding the belief that that is the most dangerous thing that could possibly happen to me? Like example again with the perfectionism, I may have picked this up as a, I'm not allowed to make mistakes. I should always have an A plus and all those things, right? But what's incorrect is the tie to like my worth as like what I
Mm,
contribute to the world, right? Like it's great if I want to perform well and I want to be excellent at what I do, but it's not actually linked to who I am as a person and the value I bring. So yeah, I think it's layered, it's nuanced, but I think the moment you start thinking about it as like, what is on the other side of this? Like, what is there that to be afraid of for me that this might be protecting me from? It opens up a completely new layer of looking at it.
hmm I love that self-compassion lens because yeah, I think so many people beat themselves up about what's not working or what decisions they're making that are harming them and things like standing in their own way totally. But I agree when you realize, oh, I'm just trying to be safe or I'm just trying to my brain's just trying to work this all out in a way where I don't get hurt in the end. It is such a freeing response. You're absolutely right. Then if you take it a step further, it's like, okay, well, like, how do I let my brain know that I want this result? Like, I don't want to be afraid of this because, say for example, we're talking about the work that the perfectionist is just continuing to detail and try and make perfect, perfect, perfect. So if you consciously know now, okay, I need to get this workout, even if it means iterating, even if it means it's not perfect, because that's going to propel me to my ultimate goal of where I want to be. How do we start shifting that fear that's coming up or trying to get ourselves into a new place where we're not the roadblock for ourselves?
Love that question. My first instinct is to say what doesn't work and what a lot of people do is well, I don't want to be afraid of this anymore, right? I always make the comparison to like you're on a diet and you're like, okay, I'm trying to be healthy and whatever, and you think in your mind, I don't want chocolate. What your brain
hmm
hears is chocolate, 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 chocolate. You're actually, sort of thinking of it more. So the first thing that needs to happen is, and you kind of alluded to this in your question, right? Like, what is this ultimate goal? Like, let me refocus on what I do want, not on what I don't want. So me being like, yeah, I don't want to care about what everybody thinks, or I don't want to, think about failure being the worst thing or whatever. That's still me thinking about that versus thinking about what's on the other side of that. So I think that's a super important shift to make. And then as far as how do I start shifting that, to summarize it as the smallest way I can, it's honestly, I think the most efficient way is by taking the smallest actions you can possibly imagine. And that sounds weird to people because they want the big leaps and they want the whatever. But
Mm,
if you're someone who's like, you spent your entire life perfecting everything and sort of really leaning into this idea that unless it's perfect, I am bad. Me saying to you like, okay, well now just publish your first draft. Like going the complete opposite is going to send you
right.
into such a panic and into such a spiral that it's going to actually backfire. Like it's probably going to make you put your guard even higher up the next time. So with the example of perfectionism, I think it actually starts a lot like smaller, as in like I need to just actually train my brain
Mm,
to withstand the discomfort of doing something imperfectly. But that doesn't mean I have to do it with my most important project first. That means I might be sending an email that has a typo in it on purpose. And that
oh.
sounds, right? It sounds silly to a lot of people because they're like, oh, like, again, one of two responses. A lot of them say, like, I mean, why would I do that? Like, people know, like, I don't want people to think that I can't spell correctly, right? Or
Right.
people go, oh, but like that's so small. How's that going to change me? And so obviously you
Mm,
need to find that sweet spot for you. And that's why it's not like, here's the 5 steps everybody needs to take to get past this. But it's something where you're like, okay, I actually know I can recover from this. And still
hmm
your instinct is to like, absolutely not. I read my email 5 times before I send it, or I use Grammarly or whatever it is. Um, to just sort of reshape the capacity that you have for making a mistake and learning that you're going to be okay anyways.
hmm That's so important. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit now about avoidance, which almost feels like the opposite of perfectionism to some degree. It's like perfectionism, you're so in the weeds, you care so much, you're getting into every detail, whereas avoidance, maybe sometimes you just want to ignore and put off and not address some of the things that are, going on, or some of the things that you need to do to improve or get to that next level. And one quote actually that you have on your page that I love is, every time you avoid discomfort, you're reinforcing the belief that you can't handle it. And so I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And I think before we dive into that, I just wanted to say that often avoidance and perfectionism are actually exactly the same,
Mm,
because the reason I'm avoiding is because I think I can't do it perfectly anyway, right? It's kind of like
gotcha.
it could be a I'm too late for this anyway. People are already doing this better than me anyway, or I don't have the time to do it the way that I want it, and so then it becomes easier to just not do it. And I say that because I often hear people kind of go, well, I'm not a perfectionist. And they think that because, I don't know, they don't have the track record that they think a perfectionist has in terms of like how highly they execute or whatever it is. But the sort of the layer beneath is still perfectionism. I'm still expecting myself to do it perfectly. And if I know that I can't do it perfectly, I just don't do it at all. That's also
Mm,
perfectionism. So I think it's
mm. It's
quite
like two
important
sides
just
of the
for
same
people to,
coin.
exactly, for people to kind of see that it's not necessarily about the behavior itself or what you can see from the outside. It's a lot more about what's driving it internally. Like, what standards are you upholding? What beliefs are you upholding? They might
Mm,
then look different in your behavior, as in one might just never stop working and keep tweaking, tweaking, tweaking and be the perfectionist who manages it all somehow. And one might be the I actually never start the things because I'm completely blocked because I won't be able to do it perfectly anyways. So,
right.
um, that's one thing. And then about the quote or that post, I guess like it's a whole post. If it's pinned on my profile, if people want to go read it as they're listening to it, because it's, I think, just something that maybe has resonated with quite a few people. It's just this idea that you create self-fulfilling prophecies. So if there's something that gives me discomfort. Now that's very different from pain or, like really drastic sort of situations I don't need to be putting myself in. But discomfort of like slight resistance or like, oh, I don't really feel like doing this, but I know I can. That's discomfort, right? And again, your brain works by repetition. It doesn't matter what you do. So if I go, there's a little of discomfort there, I'm just going to avoid that. My brain goes, oh, great. Like we can trick her into just not doing that thing. And again, that avoidance can look right. It can sound very logical. It can be the, tomorrow is a better day kind of version, or it can be well, there's all these reasons. I can give you a long list of reasons why I'm not the person to do this or whatever it is, but it's still the same thing of like, there's a discomfort there. And at some level, I know I want to be doing this thing, whatever the thing is, and I'm not doing it. And the more often that happens, the more I teach myself that I'm not the kind of person that sort of does that thing. And I often like to use like eating and gym examples just because most people have
Yeah,
had that
that
experience,
immediately
right?
came to mind for me.
And
Totally.
it's exactly that, right? Okay, like I haven't worked out in a while, and so there's going to be discomfort to get myself to work out, right? Now, me avoiding that discomfort is just going to convince me more that I'm the kind of person who can't do that,
Hmm.
which is what I mean by it reinforces the belief that you cannot withstand that discomfort. Where two things are true once I go into the discomfort, it's that A, I teach myself that I am the person that can do the thing even if it's uncomfortable. And B, I usually get more used to the thing and so it becomes less uncomfortable. And again, we use the gym example, right? The first time going back to the gym, or even the first month going to the gym, the first year going to the gym, if you've never gone, is probably going to be uncomfortable. And then the more you do it, the discomfort does it, the discomfort of doing it, right? Not like the discomfort of you're sweating at the gym, but like the getting yourself to do it, it shrinks because you become more used to being the person that can do that.
Hmm. No, it's a perfect example. And as I said, it immediately came to mind of just, I've definitely been in in funks where I can't, like I don't go to the gym or haven't been in so long, and then you beat yourself up. But definitely feeling that avoidance. It's almost like you're in these moments where you're like, okay, I should do that today. And then, 3 hours later, you're going to bed and you didn't do it. And it's like, oh man. And it's like, how do I shift that that short term comfort, like watching Netflix, to dealing with a little bit of discomfort to have that long term comfort of feeling
Mm.
energized and feeling really good about myself and what I've been able to accomplish with my body or my strength and things like that. And it's almost like really it's almost like it's so hard to shift that short term desire into your long term ultimate desire and really trying to focus there instead of just the minimal comfort of the day. And obviously, this is the gym example, but it can probably be thought about in a lot of different contexts. Like, what are your thoughts on that reframing for that longer term goal?
Can I actually ask you a question? And obviously, feel free not to answer
Hmm.
it because you've mentioned that
No, for
you've
sure.
been in this. But when you think about going to the gym, does it happen a particular way? And what I mean by that is, if I go to the gym, I'm going for an hour, or then I have to run this hard, or then I have to lift this heavy, or then whatever that, but does it have to happen in a particular way?
Mm, yeah, I'm trying to get better at that because like yes, there is definitely this element of I have to do X amount of minutes of this, and if I don't do this, then it doesn't really count as a workout because the whole point was to go and you know, lift heavy, for example. So sometimes I'll feel like if I just go and walk, I'm like that didn't count or that doesn't count for what I was really trying to do. So to a degree, yes.
What is it that you're really trying to do?
In terms of the long-term goal,
Hmm.
have a healthy and strong body.
Okay, so now how does walking not count towards that?
No, you're right. Like it does. It does. It absolutely does. I think for me, like I beat myself up when I don't strength train because I feel like that's the element of exercise that I lack the most in terms of my like day-to-day life. So it's because I walk a lot. Like I'll go for walks outside. I walk with my baby. Like these are the elements that almost like are layered into my day without trying. So then it's like, oh, if I'm trying and I'm going to the gym to try and then I don't do the exercise that for me equates to, really like putting in the effort to build strength and wellness in a different way, then I'm like bad.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that I really just want to
Hmm.
honor you sharing that. And it's actually a really powerful glimpse into a few things. Number one, you adding the layer of shame to yourself, right? It's like, then I am bad because I didn't do this thing that I've scripted
Right.
as a rule of how I should be doing the thing. And we can, again, I'm not a physical trainer or anything like that. So I know that there's plenty of arguments to make as to why strength training is really important. And also, it feels like nothing else counts. And that's just an interesting observation to make. If your actual goal is a healthy body, we could easily argue that walking absolutely contributes to that. And sure,
Hmm.
not if you only ever walk every single day, but if there's a day where you didn't go to the gym to strength train, but you went to the gym to walk so that you could at least get some sweat on, I would have that
Yeah.
count. And the reason I say that,
Right.
right? And I know I'm like kind of like not answering a question by like now asking you questions, but like
No, no.
you making it wrong is the least productive thing you can do, right? And we go back to sort of this name of the
Mm,
mind friend. You noticing a behavior of yours or even a belief of yours, something where you're like, this isn't how I want it to be. That's one layer of like, I don't want that. That's uncomfortable, or I'm not happy with that. Okay, great. I can work with that. I can say, all right, how can I do even just 5 minutes of strength training? How can I even just get myself to the gym and count that, right? I can, but the moment I go in and go like, and now I'm bad and I'm a failure and I never do what I say I'm going to do. And right, like this is the second layer. And
hmm.
that's the layer of shame and guilt and self-criticism. And that will destroy your self-trust so much faster. And that also means then your ability to create your life, because to create your life, you need self-trust. You need to be able to
Mm,
trust yourself that you're the kind of person who will show up. It will do that so much faster than you actually just not going to the gym in the way that you have perfectly planned out once, but still showing up for it. It's the still
mm,
showing up for it that matters. It doesn't matter if you show up in the exact same way that you think you should.
right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I need a little bit more, or I need a little bully myself a little bit less in my head. And one of the things I was talking to another psychotherapist, and she was talking about just like goal setting and with the self trust, building your self trust, but almost at a level that is like laughably small. Her name is Britt Frank, and she talks about like if you haven't gone to the gym in years, throw your shoe by the door and have that count as day one, and then maybe the next day you put on the shoe, and like it keeps just incrementally going from there. And so, yeah, I think I need to revisit some of the just like gentleness that comes with slowly building habits because yeah, I definitely beat myself up a lot.
Yeah. I think that I talk about that a lot too. So in the self-sabotage cure, which is my program that I take people through to sort of address their self-sabotage patterns, there's a module in there on self-trust, and it's literally all about like make it so small that you think it's ridiculous. Where it's the
Hmm.
same thing again, right? That might look different for every day. Like if I'm the kind of person who used to go to the gym and I've just not gone for 2 weeks, my getting back into it and trusting that I'm going to follow through might look different to the person that you just described who's never been, and they just throw the shoe sort of towards the door. But it's the genuinely make it so small that you think it's ridiculous, which is the same as perfectionism, right? So you notice the theme of like often what we do as humans, and especially as maybe high achieving, ambitious humans, is we, we want to get ahead of ourselves in the sense that, right, we go, well, I want to be like, yeah, I want to be the person that goes to the gym 5 times a week, right? Like I wake up on the 1st of January, I never gone to the gym, but this year I'm going to be the person who goes to the gym 5 times a week. And so I think, all right, now I just got to do it and hard knuckle it and discipline my way there. And I completely, what that does, again, it sends either me into overwhelm because all of a sudden I need to do so much willpowering and so much disciplining that it's just exhausting, or it actually, depending on how scary and uncomfortable this, how out of the familiar this is, it might send my nervous system into overwhelm and overdrive. And so then it's like, that's going to fail. 9 times out of 10, this is going to fail. And
Mm,
we do it because we think we're going to get there faster. And it's almost like this parenting moment for all of us to be like, no, the way I get there is with these incremental small steps where it's just a shoe at the door, then it's the actual shoes on, then it's like 1 gym session a week, then it's 2, then it's 2.5, and maybe by the end of the year
mhm.
it's 5. But then it's going to
Right.
stick, right? So
Yeah.
I'm actually still faster that way.
Yep. I think that is such a powerful reframe because it's not, I mean, you hear it all the time, like small steps every day. Of course, like it's not something no one's ever heard, but it feels so counterintuitive in the moment of like, oh, I'll just go 100% starting day one. And like you think that's better, but if it's not sustainable, it's actually so much worse.
Yeah.
You're so right. Hmm. Another quote that you have on your page is stop saying no to yourself before anyone else even has the chance to. So let's talk
Oh.
a little bit about denying things for ourselves and getting in our own way in that way.
Yeah. I love that you s- took that one out, I suppose, of all the things, because it's something that I see very, very commonly, and I'm going to have to generalize for this, but very commonly with the women I work with. And now, yes, there will be men out there who do this as well. And yes, that, right. Like, again, it's just for simplicity's sake,
Hmm.
I think, to say, where they will say no to themselves. And what I mean by that is they will say it's not good enough. They will say nobody wants this. They will say, yeah, but other people do it better. Again, this is the internal voice in my head, right? And so then what happens is I never actually put it out there. And so nobody else even gets to say no.
Hmm.
That's what I mean by the stop saying no to yourself before anybody else even gets the chance to. And that we can relate this back to perfectionism as well. We can relate this back to a fear of visibility. We can relate this back to many things. But at the core of it is I set the bar and I either set it so high or I'm so self-critical or I've been taught to be those things that that's it. Yeah, I keep myself in this vacuum of that's not for me. Other people do that better. That's not good enough. All of those things where a lot of great work, genuinely, a lot of great ideas never see the light of day because I've said
Mm,
no to them before anybody else has the chance to. And that's frankly, honestly, as a human and as a person who gets insight into some of these ideas that never see the light of day, it makes me incredibly sad because there's so many
yeah.
wonderful ideas out there and wonderful, whether it's business ideas or ideas for connection or ideas to live more fulfilled in their own lives. It doesn't really matter, but it gets stuck in some completely made up system within my mind of what's allowed to exist and what I'm allowed to put out there and what's good enough to be out there because I say no to myself before anybody else has a chance to. And often we do that because
Hmm.
we're so afraid that somebody else might say no, right? We've maybe made that
Yeah.
connection where we come back to that there's the beliefs, the thoughts, there's layers to this, right? But if I'm so afraid that somebody else will say no, it's usually because I think that whatever they say is the truth about it, right? So if they say no, then I'm clearly not good enough. And then I don't want to hear that from them. And so I'm never going to put myself in that position.
Hmm. Yeah, that
But
rejection piece is what immediately comes to mind for me.
exactly. But the other hand, right, we reject ourselves. We don't give anybody else a chance to say yes either if I'm not putting it out there.
Yeah, I understand that one to a degree because it's like if you're the reason, then it's not as painful as someone else saying it, but at the same time, you lose out the possibility that people would be like, "Wow, yes, this is amazing," or "We definitely need this," or "What a good idea," or all of the positive things that could happen. And I think you can tell me if this is true or not, but I heard that we overestimate kind of like negative consequences and underestimate like positive potential upsides. Is that true?
That's true, and it makes sense from a survival perspective. I need to be so much more
Yes.
attuned to threats than to the positives, right? I need to be so much more attuned, prepared for the tiger around the corner
Right.
than the berries that might blossom because it's a beautiful day and I'll be able to eat in 2 months,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so it's almost like you're conditioned to think things are going to go more wrong than probable, and that whatever good thing, whatever good idea you might have, whatever good suggestion you might have, will likely not be as well received as it probably will.
And not even just, right? Like this is also true for when it actually happens. I'll get 10 compliments and one critical feedback, and I will 100% completely focus on the critical one, right? It's the
Yeah.
same mechanism of it just gets naturally by default more highlighted. And so it's my work when we talk about this whole relationship reshaping with your mind, it's my work to not take that for factfulness, right? Not take that
Hmm.
as, well, one person said this was negative and they said this and that. So clearly it's a terrible offer or a terrible idea or anything like that, but to recognize where my psychology and the biases I have and the quick thinking patterns that are activated by default actually like harm me or trap me or limit me, and to bring myself back to a state of more balanced thinking where I don't just go into well, the negative is highlighted and it's all I can think about. So clearly that's what's true. There's a lot of like thinking trapping within what I just said, that sentence. Um, but to bring myself back into a state where I can see more of reality. I'm never going to see all of reality because that's not how it works. Our brains filter so much out, right? So it's always going to depend on sort of what I'm focusing on and what I'm primed for. But to just bring myself back into a more clear thinking space. And that's my work. It's always going to be my work because the default will still be the default. And we're not going to outgrow our survival mechanisms that quickly, right? Like, as much as we do adapt, we probably won't adapt within our lifetime, right? Or even the next or the next. So we kind of just have to learn this and be more aware of it and have to stop shaming ourselves for it and
Hmm.
learn to then reshape from there and rewire from there instead of sort of the mythical idea that if I do it perfectly, I won't ever get the negative feedback, or one day I'm going to be so fearless, I'm not going to care at all about the negative feedback or about the failures or whatever it is. It's like, no, you will, because you're literally built that way. But that doesn't mean you can't learn to build a relationship around that that is fruitful for you.
Hmm. Something kind of related, that another quote from you is, being realistic might be your biggest limitation.
Mm.
And the reason I say it's somewhat related is because what if your personal idea of realistic is actually a lot lower, a lot less generous than what really is realistic?
Yeah. I think that's one element of it for sure. Like it's this, the core truth in that is what even is reality, right? You could
Mm,
ask, I mean, you ask 100 different people that question and you make sure that you've got a bit of a broad sample. You don't just ask your 100 close friends who live in the same social bubble as you or whatever it is.
right.
And you'll get different answers. Like, what does it mean to be a human, a day in the life, of a person on this earth? Like, reality is there's no such thing as the one reality. And so often my idea of reality will be shaped by my upbringing, maybe what my parents thought was realistic, what I learned was realistic in school, or, other sort of peers, or even the workplace of like, it's not realistic to get, let's say, a promotion earlier than 3 years into the job or something like that, right? That might be a reality in some companies. It doesn't mean that it's a reality in other companies, or that you couldn't still start your own business and give yourself the promotion, or, right? Like,
Right.
reality is made up. That's one element of that. The other piece of that, though, of this post that I think is quite relevant is sort of where you put your focus. And if so what that post is about is sort of scarcity thinking and sort of the idea that, oh, just be realistic, like don't want too much and don't sort of I guess, even dream of something better, bigger, of being the person who has it all or who makes it or anything like that, because it's not
Yeah.
realistic. And again, that's already faulty, because what does it mean to be realistic? But also because it keeps you in a completely different mindset, and like it colors your world in a very different lens from a sort of abundance being everywhere and there's enough for everyone and there's enough for me, and there's always a way. And not that where there's a will there's a way, as in if I just hard knuckle it, but sort of more the creative, there's a way and the
Yeah.
opportunities are there, and I'm going to open myself up to the idea that they are, because then what typically happens is all of a sudden I start seeing them. And that always sounds like magical thinking to people, but it's very much
Hmm.
based in just, right, your brain, essentially. And like, I could go into confirmation bias, or we could go into the reticular activating system, which is just kind of like this idea of you have a filter and you can set that filter. And so
Hmm.
the example that most people know is, if I'm shopping for a red car, I've decided I want a red car. And all of a sudden, it feels like everybody has a red car because I see it everywhere.
Yep.
There's not, from today to tomorrow, there's not more red cars on the street. It's just that I'm noticing them because that's what I'm focusing on, what I'm priming myself for, right? So
Totally. That's so funny
it's
you
that
brought
same
this up.
idea.
I was just gonna say, I was making a joke with my husband the other day. We were talking about how there's like no more Volkswagen Beetles, like, because we used to just do that like punch buggy, no punch packs. We were talking about it. And ever since that conversation, I'm telling you, I see them everywhere. And I'm like, they're still all around us. Like, since when? And I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, I must have that filter on because now I'm like aware and have thought
Hmm.
about it recently that now I can like see them in parking lots. And it's just such a funny example of exactly that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you. Because it's exactly that. All of a sudden, you've somehow made it relevant for your brain, right? And
Yeah,
again, your brain filters like 90 to 99% of your reality at any point, because it's impossible for you to absorb everything that's actually going on. So the Volkswagen Beetles, they were probably there before as well, but your brain was
Yeah.
just that like was completely focusing on something else. So they were just lost in the blur of everything else that happens in the world at any given time. And all of a sudden it
Hmm.
becomes relevant. And so it's
Hmm.
this, right? Like when we talk about being realistic, and this obviously, this post that you mentioned relates a lot to business and what I think is possible for running my business or how I can approach my business or make money or anything like that. And it's like
Yeah.
the moment you start looking for, let's say you think it's not possible to make good money without working 60 plus hours a week. Let's say that's just that's what realistic is. Oh, be realistic. You can't make that kind of
Right.
money and not also be working all the time or something like that. I promise you, the moment I challenge you to be like, okay, go out and find me 5 examples of people who do this, and that might be an effort for you to find the first 5, let's say. But before you know it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, and this person, and this person. And like, you will start seeing it. And it's the same mechanism that you just mentioned with the car, which is like, they were always there. And yes, they might be in the
Hmm.
minority, as in, because most people, you know, let's say might have a corporate job and sort of follow a system that is given, but they're there. It's possible. Like, how do you define reality? And that will impact how you experience reality.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate too just talking about kind of this abundance mindset and openness to these new ideas. Do you believe in manifestation? Do you think this is semi-related? Obviously, not that I'm like willing with my mind things to happen, but even just that idea of the possibilities and manifestation being kind of a way to get yourself in that frame of mind.
So I'm going to say yes and.
Hmm.
I think yes and it really depends on, yeah, what somebody deems as manifestation, right? And I say that because I see a
Right.
lot of interpretations of manifestation, let's say, on the internet. And what it isn't is just you know, I make a vision board and I just think about it hard enough and then it happens.
Hmm.
That's not what it is, right? And then this is where my capacity for discomfort and my capacity to take action and do some things that might be scary and whatever, they have to play a role in this. But what
Hmm.
I do think, and where I do think it is super relevant and super effective, is again, setting my filter, setting my focus, right? So priming myself to look for these things and to be open to these things and sort of filter my reality that way. But also just for direction, I want to say again, right? When we think about what do I not want versus what do I want, and most people
Right.
know a lot about what they don't want, but they don't know so much about what they want. And same example that we had earlier on with the, I don't want chocolate. A more useful question or focus point might be like, what's another really nice, like, sweet treat that I can make that's going to feel like comforting or satisfying or whatever the chocolate gives me, but might be healthier
Hmm.
for me. Whether I do then have it or not, that's a better focus point for me to put in than to the
Right.
what I don't want. And so I think what manifestation, and again, this is probably in most interpretations, whether it's, more science or spirituality based or more like just positive thinking based, whatever, like however we can categorize these manifestation sort of tactics I see out there. It's this idea that I let myself imagine something that is actually like better than. And that in its principle, I think will work for anyone. But what it also then
Hmm.
like where it adds to that is often it like I let myself imagine something that is so good that I can't even yet believe that it might be possible. So it's like I become a bit like extreme and
Mm.
delusional is the word the kids like to use these days, right? About this. But that actually still works or it can work if it's followed or I guess aligned with the actions. Because all it does is it requires me to like become a different person, which is what any big dream does require of me. Like again, what got you here, what get you there kind of thing, right? And so I think in
Hmm.
those ways, absolutely, there are absolutely elements that work. I just think the biggest mistake I see people making is the slap the vision board together, be in this beautiful, inspired space for quite some time, right? And then just don't have the execution bits, and you need to make that connection. Like I said at the start, otherwise you become that oh, I have all these wonderful visions and dreams, but I'm in the gap of the execution, and I think that's what it can lead to when we're not clear on, yes, I want to set my target, I want to give myself that focus and that direction, and I want to filter
Hmm.
for these things. I want to see more of the opportunities. I want to see more of the possibilities to make this happen. I want to see more of the possibilities to have my dream home or whatever it is, to feel a certain type of way.
Hmm.
And also, I need to consistently make myself feel that way, do those things, show up for that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They need to come together.
Yeah.
So that's where manifestation, I think, often can be a bit tricky.
No, that's perfect. And I guess just on that point of practices, ways that we can further um, move towards that ideal goal or vision or life, and how we stop self-sabotaging or stop getting in our own way. We've talked a little bit about micro goals. We've talked about setting our intentions, focusing on the positive or the thing in that direction. Are there any other practices or techniques that you suggest to your clients in terms of moving themselves in that direction of positivity and towards those ultimate goals?
Yeah. If I may, I'm just going to quickly, for the first one, the micro goals, I think I would categorize that one as build or rebuild your self-trust, because
Okay,
will hinge on that, right? So it's kind of like, that's the reason we're doing that. We're not just like, ooh, set cute micro goals just so you can. It's about flexing the muscle of like, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. That's what that
gotcha.
serves. Then yes, the focus in the direction. And I think that two other elements. One, presence, practicing presence. So whether you start a meditation practice or whether you start a breathing practice or whether you find a different way to center yourself, the point that you want to be making is to be able to be an observer to what is happening in your mind. That can happen during meditation. It could also be you free write your thoughts. I often like to not box people in to like, oh, what you should do is like now you have to meditate or now you have to do this. But it's the giving yourself a space where you can be present, and that allows you to be an observer. Now, in some
Mm,
cases, so personally, and a lot of my clients, I might be overwhelmed and I might have spinning thoughts, right? So I might need to do a bit of a brain dump and get it all out on paper. And only then can I be like, okay, I can now observe this. And that might then be by reading it back or asking myself critical questions about it. But, in its essence, as an everyday hygiene practice, I often like to say mental hygiene. How do I
mhm,
practice just even a moment of presence, a moment where I center into my breath, into my senses, into just a moment of where I'm not doing or thinking, anything in particular, where I let my mind wander, to just practice this habit of there's always this. And then there's a chatter that happens, but I have the choice of how I react to that chatter. That's another, I think, really, really important element of practice. And then the last is connection, like repeated connection to what is going well and what I want more of. And again, that can look
mm,
like many different ways. Some people like almost have like their vision board, but then they look at it every single morning. Or some people want to practice sort of, even they have so many things happening already that are really great, but they never take the time to acknowledge. And again, if I validate what's going well, if I put focus there, I'm going to start seeing and creating more of that. So it's simple practices like asking at the start of the day, like, what are the three things that would make this today a really great day? And it can be anything. I don't care if it's, related to work or it's just like something that you want to do in your private life or a way you want to feel or whatever it is. But give yourself a positive intention, give yourself a positive focus. And then at the end of the day, kind of go like, hey, what three things did I like maybe even exceed my expectations on? Or what went really well today? What do I feel really happy or proud about? And these are such simple things. And I like, honestly, a lot of the things that my clients and I work on are simple, right? We talk about, oh, yeah, the micro
mhm.
goals. Like everybody knows, start simple, start small, but you still have to do it. And this is the part where like people are like, ah, it's too small to do. And so then we have to dive into like the belief systems around that. But I think that would be, there's so much winning that is already happening. You're just not seeing it. But the moment you start seeing it and acknowledging it, or giving yourself a bar to measure it by, you will create more of it. so much success happens, but never gets celebrated, seen, acknowledged, because it simply wasn't given the sort of, I haven't given myself a framework to measure it against, or I just haven't stopped to acknowledge it. And so I'm constantly in this lack of like, well, it's not enough, right? The idea of I reach a goal, but I immediately start thinking about the next one
Yeah.
is also moving from, because it's never enough. I'm moving from scarcity. I'm not moving from a wow, let me look at, like, let me at least take a 10-minute reflection and like look back at everything I did to make this happen, reinforcing my self-trust,
Hmm.
reinforcing my agency to make whatever I want happen.
Yeah. That I really I appreciate that because I've not heard that reflection in terms of self-trust in this way. I hear a lot about like gratitude and taking a moment to pause and be grateful, but not really reflecting on all the things that you did to make that thing possible. If you're grateful for something that happened and that you had a lot of agency over, it's like, wow, like give yourself a pat on the back too. Like we can be grateful and also, yeah, remember that you can accomplish hard things, you can do hard things. I don't think people talk about that enough, and that's a really great point. And just on that note there about moving from scarcity to scarcity, and I think it's like normal as humans, like we set a goal, we achieve it, we want a new goal. Like it's part of that like propelling forward, totally. But you're right, if there's no moment of recognition that we hit a goal and it's what we wanted and we were working really hard towards it, then like what's the point? Like we'll never be grateful, we'll never be happy, we'll never be satisfied. And you talk about this concept called soft ambition, and I want to talk a little bit about that and maybe how it's related to feeling a little bit more well and whole and centered while we are trying to achieve.
Mm. Um, the first thought that comes to mind as we talk about going from goal to goal, where it's true, we absolutely, as humans, we love goals. We want the direction and we want to, it's interesting, right? Because usually what's actually most satisfying for us isn't reaching the goal, it's the progress towards the goal. And it's what
Mm.
like becomes of us in the process. Um, but it's a very different, I guess, just general stance to then set the next goal from a, well, that wasn't good enough. And sort of now, like, it's like from this like constant hamster wheelie, more
Mm-hmm.
idea versus from an idea of like, what else would be really cool to do? Like, it's just a completely different question to approach even how you
Yeah.
set a goal in the first place. And I think that's again, maybe more of a societal standard and norm of like the chase for the promotions and the money and the status and the cars and and it's never enough. It's never enough. Where if we pause enough to ask, well, if the ultimate goal, the promise of the goals is to be happy, to be content, to feel fulfilled, then let me readjust and see how I can already maximize for that in the pursuit of whatever goal I set. And I think that's a bit of the difference in just the general approach to goals. Soft ambition, which was your question, comes from comes from trying to create a middle ground for honoring ambition because again, we want to get places and often the people I work with are the kind of people who are like, I just want more. Like I know that
Yeah.
I'm meant for more. I want more. I want, I want to live my life this way. It's like I have this vision for like these extraordinary things and whatever it is. And so I'm ambitious. By virtue of that, I'm ambitious. Like I have ambitions. But we're taught about ambition in such a way that it's very hustly, white knuckle, grind, perfectionist, sort of that's
Mm.
ambition. And soft ambition kind of opens up the space for having those dreams and ambitions and working towards them, but also being more rooted, grounded, content, fulfilled, whatever you want to call it, where I am. So it's giving a space for those two things to be true at the same time, which is often such a
Mm.
paradox in people's minds. But it's
Yeah.
true, right? In general, as a general thing, I have a lot of posts about this too. Like two things can be true at the same time. Like in the moment you allow yourself for that to be reality, you really free yourself because it can be true that I am ambitious and I want more, whatever the more is for you, or I want different. That can be
Mm-hmm.
true. And at the same time, it can be true that I can find gratitude, peace, fulfillment, happiness, joy, whatever it is, in what is currently happening. So I don't always have to wish myself away to the next thing in order to be ambitious. I can have both be true. That's what soft ambition kind of tries to capture, where it's like we're ambitious and we're going after it, but never at the cost of, losing the enjoyment or the fulfillment or the contentment of the current moment. And I say
Mm-hmm.
never, and I
That's
immediately
so
want to take it back because obviously there's days when it doesn't feel that way, but like as a general stance.
No, it's so beautifully said, and I feel like you're right in terms of it feeling paradoxical and almost, if you're someone who talks a lot about being grateful and like rooted in feeling fulfilled on a day-to-day basis, there's almost people who shame or judge people who are ambitious and want more. But there's nothing wrong with wanting to progress and wanting to achieve. That's not a sin. That's not something that's bad to do. And at the same time, there's people on the flip side who are really, really ambitious and they can look at people who are, satisfied and call it like stagnant or not ambitious or just like, trudging along and not really going after anything. And there's this feeling of judgment from both sides. I can notice sometimes depending on the things I'm listening to or the books I'm reading or whatever I'm watching. And you're right. I think all of us are probably aiming to be both and
Mm.
recognize and feel like there's nothing wrong with either side, really.
I think so. I think so too. And I think that is, again, often most people's goal when you ask them, why do you want to achieve this goal? They say, because then I'll be happy, or then I'll finally be at peace, or
Mm-hmm.
then I will, right? Like they want an experience behind that. And the truth about experiences when it comes to feelings is they are accessible to you at any time, right? Like we often think that it only happens to us, but I also can cultivate and I can
Yeah.
lean into and I can, again, focus on and expand as in on purpose versus just be like, well, then this thing will happen and then I will be like, that doesn't work. We know this. It doesn't, it never works. So I think, yes, most people want both. Like it always comes back to, I want to feel a certain way. It's just that we have ourselves in this illusion, this trap that it can only be that way if, right? I've created a rule around
Yeah.
that. And so I think the most valuable thing to do is A, embrace the duality of that, but B, also be intentional about what you're ambitious about. So you don't, not everybody has to be ambitious. Like not everybody has to be ambitious in the, almost in the traditional sense where it's like, I'm going to become a millionaire and I'm going to run this massive company and I'm going to talking
Mm-hmm.
to business owners now, right? Like I like this again, I think this is a pinned post on my profile, but like I say I'm ambitious about freedom. Like I want to maximize for freedom in my business where I want
Mm-hmm.
my business to facilitate my life in such a way that yes, I enjoy what I'm doing. Yes, I'm having an impact. I feel like I'm doing something purposeful in the world and I'm obviously earning an income and I'm earning, what I want that determines a good life for me. But what I'm most ambitious about is freedom, meaning I get to choose if on a Wednesday I want to take the day off and I want to go for a hike instead. I get to choose when I take a holiday, when I don't. I get to choose who I work with and who I don't work with. Like, right, that freedom, like if I'm not gonna list it all out now, but sort of the list of freedom that I have, the ambition around freedom I have is very, very long. And there's many,
Mm-hmm.
many aspects of that I haven't yet reached. But that's the ambition I truly hold, right? And so in the pursuit of that, I feel very values aligned and very at peace because I already
Mm-hmm.
have so much of it. And I'm so clear on what that means that I can also acknowledge, yeah, the Monday morning where, I don't know, I work from bed or whatever it is. It's like all
Yeah.
these micro moments where I have that. It's here. And also I want more of it. And also I want to work towards, but it's here and I can bask in the glory of that, if that makes sense of like, oh my gosh, I have
Mm-hmm.
so much of that. And if I define it by any other term, right? If I said, well, the goal or the ambition is to whatever, insert any random, like financial goal, or I need X amount of followers, or I need to have this title or this
Yeah.
car or whatever it is, that's not really centered around a value or a feeling that you want. I think that's so much more fruitful in the sense of like leading to
Yeah.
contentment, fulfillment, happiness.
I love that. And I just love how you've just reminded us too that ambition can look different on anyone. Everyone's goals can be different, but as long as we're kind of grounded in those values, um, it makes it a worthy pursuit, regardless of what it is. Um, as we wrap up here, I would just love to ask you if listeners could take away one thing from you and our conversation today, what would you want it to be?
You have a choice. I think, and what I mean by that is you have a choice in what it feels like within your mind and how your mind supports you or not. So going back to the original idea of the mind friend, you can reshape that relationship. And I think that that's something that a lot of people underestimate. They go like, well, I'm just built this way, or, I've always thought this, or whatever it is. And even if I've always thought something, I can rewire. So you have a choice.
Perfect. Lastly, where
What
can
about
people
you?
find more? What did I
Sorry.
take away from this conversation? Oh my gosh. No one's ever asked me. Um, I think I think just I love the point on soft ambition, especially for my time of life because I'm on maternity leave, so I'm kind of busy in other ways, but knowing and feeling like I'm still working towards other goals that I find valuable, like this podcast or school and things like that. It's like, okay, just because I'm not grinding 80 hours a week at this pursuit doesn't mean I'm not going in the right direction or I'm not still aiming towards it. So it's almost like slow, metered progress while still trying to balance other priorities that are equally or more important to me. And so I'm really going to take in that soft ambition idea and just feel really content and happy about the progress, but that it is whole and fulfilling while it's happening and it's not kind of over consuming my entire life at the same time. So, yeah, thank you for asking me. Lastly, where can
Sure.
listeners find out more about you, get connected?
Best place is Instagram. So if you search on Instagram, the mind friend, that's all together, no caps or symbols or anything like that, just the mind friend, then you'll find me there. And I always love getting a message if you listen to this, love where you're coming from. Don't ever hesitate to slide into my DMs. And then you'll find everything else from there as well.
Amazing. Charlotte, thank you so much. This was such an amazing conversation.
I'm so glad. Thank you for having me and being so open to just have a chat and bounce ideas off each other.